Today we're going to find our x and y intercepts. So first of all, what are the x and the y intercepts? Your x-intercept is right here on your graph. It's where your line crosses your x-axis. So if you look at this red highlighted axis, that's your x-axis. That point where your green line crosses it is your x-intercept. Now, your x-intercept will always have a number value for x, and your y value will be a 0. So if you look at where this point is, its ordered pair is 5, 0. Now your y-intercept is right here. Again, draw that on your graph. Your y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. So if you look here, this blue line is your y-axis, and that's where the green line crosses it. So your y-intercept will always have a number value for y, but your x value will be your 0. So again, if you look at this, its ordered pair is 0, 3. Now, x and y intercepts can be really helpful when we're graphing. We can graph without knowing our slope if you know your x and y intercept. So what we would do for that is we would take our x-intercept, which is -4, 0, and we would put that on our graph. And then we would take our y-intercept here, which is 0, 3, and we could put that on our graph. And what we can do is we can just connect these 2 points together, and we don't even need to worry about what our slope is. We can just graph it based on these 2 points. Okay? So take a minute, do the problem that's on the right here. Use those 2 intercepts to create your graph. Now, finding your x and y intercepts can be done 3 different ways. Okay? And depending on the type of equation you're given, it might change the method you use. Substitution can work with any kind of equation, whether it's slope-intercept form or standard form or just even some weird kind of equation that doesn't fit one of these forms, you can use substitution. We also have something called the cover-up method. That only works with standard form. So if you're given a standard form equation, you can use that method, or you can change your equation into standard form because you know how to do that. And finally, we could use our calculators, but that will only work with a y== equation. So I'm going to show you one example of each type, and then you can practice each method. So the first method is substitution. Now substitution will work with any type of equation, but the thing you need to know is when you use substitution, you're actually going to have to solve your equation twice. You solve it once to find your x-intercept and once to find your y-intercept. And what you're going to be substituting in is 0. One time you're going to substitute in your 0 for x, and one time you'll substitute it in for y, and that will help you find each intercept. So to find your x-intercept, we want y to equal 0. So what we do is we would take this equation, 2x plus 3y, but instead of y, we're going to substitute in that value of 0. Now, 3 times 0 is actually anything times 0 is going to be 0. So what we have here is 2x equals 24. And then when I go to solve this and I do this division, I see that x equals 12. Now this 12 is the x value of the ordered pair we have for our x-intercept. So my x value is 12. Remember, the y value we substituted in was 0, and that gives you your ordered pair. We can graph that right on our graph at 12, 0. Now this time we're going to do the exact same thing, but to find our y-intercept, we're going to put in the 0 for x. So we'll put in a 0 here. Again, anything times 0 is 0, so we'll end up with 3y equals 24. When we divide both sides by 3, we find our value is y equals 8. So again, in this ordered pair, my y value is 8, the x value I plugged in was 0, and so now we can graph this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right up here, and we can connect these points together to make a line. Now, you have 2 more examples on your paper. Go ahead and try them. They're not going to ask you to graph. You're just finding the x and y intercepts using substitution. Go ahead and pause the video, do those 2 problems on your own, and then we'll move on to the next method. So our next method is called the cover-up method. The first thing you need to know about the cover-up method is your equation has to be in standard form. If it's not, you can put it into standard form, but it has to be standard form. Now this method uses the concept we had with our substitution method without actually doing the substitution. And what I mean by that, if you look over here, remember, Anytime we substituted in a 0, that kind of became a 0, not kind of became a 0, became a 0 and canceled out. So instead of rewriting this equation this way, we're just going to use what we call the cover-up method. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up this y value. We're imagining that what I've done is I've plugged in a 0. 3 times 0 is 0, so that's now gone. And what I'm left with is 6x equals 18. I can solve this equation and find out that x equals 3. That means the x value in my x-intercept is 3, and the y value is 0. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, except this time I'm going to cover up my 6, okay, my x value. So now what I'm left with is 3y equals 18. Divide by 3. And remember, this is like saying 6 times 0, so it's gone. And I get y equals 6, which means the y value is 6, my x value is 0. And those are the two intercepts that I have. So again, use your cover-up method for the next two problems, and then move on, and we'll show you finally the calculator method. So here's our calculator method. The only way you can use your calculator is if you have a slope-intercept form equation, so one of those y equals equations. And we're going to do this exactly the way we've entered equations into our calculator before, is we're going to take this and put it into the y equals part of our calculator. So go ahead. Oops. First thing we should always do is clear the memory in our calculator because you don't know what somebody was doing before you. So we're going to go to y equals, and then we're going to enter this equation, 2x plus 10. So 2x plus 10, and then we have to go to our table. So we'll hit second and our table key. Now what we're looking for, remember, is we want to find the place where x equals 0 and where y equals 0, because those are going to be our two intercepts. So when we have x equals 0, we can see that y equals 10. So our first intercept is going to be 0, 10. That's your y-intercept. Now we have to find our x-intercept, and remember, the place for your x-intercept is where y is going to be 0. If you look at the numbers in your y column, they're getting bigger, so we have to go backwards a little bit until we find the place where y equals 0. And we can see that when y is 0, x is negative 5. So our x-intercept is going to be negative 5, 0. Okay? Now remember, this will only work if you have a slope-intercept form or y equals equation, but go ahead and use your calculator for the bottom two problems that you see here.